Let me ask the question to you, since I asked it to the children. How are you getting ready for Christmas, aside from putting up a tree, buying the presents, doing all that? Prophecy was designed to get people ready, and we're going to look at a prophecy today that the Lord gave as a model for at least one aspect of the way we can think about getting ready for Christmas. Some prophecies, like the Lord will be born in Bethlehem, really obvious. Other ones take a little bit more digging, and we're going to look at one that's going to take some digging. This is from Isaiah chapter 7. Includes a well-known part. We're focusing on a less well-known part. Jehovah spoke again to Ahaz, saying, "Ask a sign for yourself from Jehovah your God." But Ahaz said, "I will not ask, nor will I test Jehovah." Then he said, "Hear now, O house of David, is it a small thing that you weary men, but will you also weary God? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Butter and honey he shall eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that you dread will be forsaken by both her kings. Jehovah will bring the king of Assyria upon you and your people and your father's house. And it shall come to pass in that day that Jehovah shall whistle to the fly that is in the farthest parts of the river of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. In the same day the Lord shall shave with a hired razor with those from beyond the river, with the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the legs, and will also remove the beard. And it shall be in that day that a man will keep alive a young cow and 2 sheep. So it will be from the abundance of milk they give that he will eat butter and honey. For butter and honey everyone will eat who is left in the land. So butter and honey he shall eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. What kind of mental picture does that conjure up for you? For me, I sort of think of someone kind of laying back in a relaxed way, eating something, kind of sumptuous. The children of Israel were promised a land flowing with milk and honey, which was a big deal, because they didn't have sweetened food. They didn't have excess. The fatted calf was a big deal because it was tender meat, the kind of meat that we get all the time. That was unusual. So this was untold luxury, butter and honey. This is the best that life could get. Now this prophecy told of the Lord's coming on earth, and it follows right after, "Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a child, and shall call his name Emmanuel." And that people are very aware of. It was essential that the Lord be born of a virgin, that his soul was God, and that he took on a humanity from Mary. So he had 2 levels of consciousness, one that was running the universe and the other that was human in this world. And over the course of his work, he perfected that lower humanity so that it could become a perfect vessel for his soul. And he could become God with us, God in the flesh, because of that work that he did. We talk about the Lord, taking on a humanity just like ours. And that's true, but his experience wasn't exactly like yours and mine, because he did have a divine soul. So our work is to go from natural people, like Zyla was saying, how many presents do I get? To spiritual people, how can I bring the Lord into my life and serve other people? That wasn't the Lord's challenge. That was not hard for the Lord. His challenge was that he took on this humanity, and he was able to look at it from deep inside and say, can I help all the other people that I've come to save, who have this mess that they have to work through, am I able to save them? So the Lord's challenge was clearing a path for us, not for himself. So he was dealing with a different thing. And this is implied in the virgin birth story. And then the immediate phrase following on, butter and honey he shall eat, is talking about the Lord's motivation, why he wanted to do this. So although it's not obvious in the prophecy, the Lord went through a lot of struggles while he was on earth. And he used that finite humanity as a proving ground. He took on every negative experience, every negative emotion, every falsity that we would ever face, and he conquered them, not with divine power, that would have been easy, but with a limited power which was much more akin to what you and I face our challenges with. Except he faced these evils in full. Not just the presenting problems that we deal with, but the underlying essence. He also conquered that. And he did it completely so that that vessel, the mind and the body, became a perfect vessel. None of us gets there. We get to a good vessel. And the butter and honey is about what drove him. Here's a passage about the butter and honey. Anyone can see that butter and honey do not mean here butter and honey, but something divine corresponding to them. For it is added that he may know to remove the evil and choose the good. And that is not known by eating butter and honey. Butter symbolizes the delight coming from spiritual goodness, and honey, the delight coming from natural goodness. Consequently, the two symbolize the Lord's divine spiritual and divine natural, thus his human, interior and exterior. So this is talking about what delighted the Lord, the way that he delighted in truth, as some of the teachings talking about this passage express, and the ways that he wanted to put that truth to use, which was clearing a pathway for us so that we could find our delight. So this is a story about choosing, about tasting what is good and saying, for that, I'm willing to fight. If you think about your lives, we have many, many, many things we could take on in our lives, right? And from that list, we say, this is the one that I'm willing to stand for. The other ones, we'll leave them be. This is the one I stand for. This is the one I fight for. The Lord was born on earth to save us. That was his motivation and his delight. Now, and read a couple passages that talk about that a little bit. The union of his human essence with his divine essence. In this, the Lord had in view the conjunction of himself with the human race. This was his purpose and his love, which was such that the salvation of the human race, as seen in the union of himself with his Father, was to him his inmost joy. I love that phrase. His deepest delight, his inmost joy was connecting with us. And it still is. Another passage. That the Lord alone became righteousness for the whole human race may be seen from the fact that he alone fought from divine love, namely from love towards the whole human race, whose salvation was what he solely desired and burned for in his combats. Isn't that wonderful to think about the way the Lord was thinking about us in his battles? You probably sometimes had something close to it when you're struggling with something and you aren't sure what the outcome's going to be, and you're able to think then of the impact your behavior would have on someone you care about. And that could be a tipping point. Like, oh, it becomes clear now. I have to change that behavior. The Lord did that all the time whereas we might do it occasionally. So think about the inner peace that comes from doing something that you love to do. You know, when hard things come up, it's not overwhelming when you're doing something that you really love. When people are doing work that they love, challenges come up and they just work them through it. They work through it where other people will just, drag themselves around all day. At another time, the Lord said, I have food to eat of which you do not know. So we see the Lord doing all these things while he was on earth, and we don't see how he was fed by looking at everybody with love, seeking their salvation. And because he made our salvation his delight, he was willing to do that work within himself that cleared the pathway so that we can follow. And here's a teaching about the connection between the Lord's delight and our delight, and it's talking about heavenly joy. Heaven in itself is so full of delights that viewed in itself, it is nothing else than blessedness and delight. So just pause and say, that's what the Lord's holding out for all of us. The divine love that flows from the divine good that flows from the Lord's divine love is what makes heaven in general and in particular with everyone there. And the divine love is a longing for the salvation of all and the happiness of all from inmost and in fullness. Thus, whether you say heaven or heavenly joy, it is the same thing. So the Lord's longing for our salvation translates out into our experience of heavenly joy. That's the analog in our experience. And to that end, he cleared out a pathway by his life on earth. And he says, here's the pathway. Walk it. Here are the truths. Follow me. And as the prophecy said, butter and honey everyone will eat who is left in the land. In other words, when we follow and when we stick in the land here is the church, when our spiritual principles, and we stick to those, we get that same delight. Our small human version of what the Lord had all the time. So we can ask ourselves then, well, what is your delight? What is butter and honey to you? What is your true happiness? Sometimes we're aware of it, sometimes not so much. But we all have times when we come into, this is what's important to me. We're all trying to pursue delight, happiness all the time. That's just what we do. But sometimes we go off track. And the Lord spoke to that in Isaiah. He said, Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come buy and eat. Yes, come and buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend money for what is not bread, and your wages for what does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and let your soul delight itself in abundance. Incline your ear, and come to me. Hear, and your soul shall live. And do you notice that delight word showing up again? Let your soul delight itself in abundance. Great phrase. So the Lord says, I'm giving you free delight. Why do you keep going for things that aren't delightful? And we know from our experience, the Lord gives us this clear path, and we go off it, then we say, ooh, what about this? And we realize, oh no, that wasn't so fun. And we come back on the path, and then, oh, what about this? And we're sort of in this weaving in and out of the Lord's delight, and then chasing ephemeral delight, and eventually coming back, we hope, to saying, no, what the Lord says is what gives lasting delight. And the reason that we find those off-path ones don't give us delight is that they're empty calories. They feel good, and then they leave us empty. They leave us unfulfilled. They don't have any lasting power. And the choice the Lord's asking us to make is to find delight in what gives Him delight. Because then He can fill us. As He said on earth, do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you. And whenever the Son of Man is mentioned in Scripture, that means the Word. So the Lord's saying, go to the truths in the Word, and you will get delight that never perishes. That he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. When we have an inner compass about the delight that we're shooting for, standards and principles that are at the center, then we see the dangers of going off path. And reading from the work Married Love, for evil is recognized from the experience of good, not good from the experience of evil. Even as a sweet smell is not detected by the nose when it has a foul odor clinging to it. So you want to know what hate is? Focus on what love is, and from that you'll be able to see how hate takes you off the path. You want to know what pride is? Focus on humility, and you'll see how pride takes you off the path. So in the new church, we spend a lot of time saying, well, look at your biggest problem and work to get rid of it. Good and important point. But here the Lord is taking a step back and saying, get in touch with the good that you want, and from that you can look at the things that are taking you off the path and say, no, I want to stay on the path because I want that good thing. I'm sure we've all had this experience of dealing with something that we didn't want to do, and we were kind of just slogging our way through it. And then a complete distraction comes up, and it's fun, and it's exciting, and we have instant energy, and then we come back to the task, and now we're feeling energized, and we face the choice of going back to that task. Am I going to go back to my grumpy old way that felt burdened, or am I going to keep this energy and face the task with a renewed sense of focus? It's just amazing how much the attitude that we bring to the situation changes our experience of it. And that's especially true in hard times. The prophecy went on to talk about how hard life would be. And, talked about the king of Assyria coming. They were the big power then. This was scary. And the prophecy about the hair being shaved and whistling for the fly, and we don't need to get into the details of it, are talking about how false ideas can come in and just wreck our lives and devastate our spiritual state. This is when we find ourselves, interacting poorly with other people, blaming them for the problems or blaming ourselves for everything that is going wrong. Or when we get so busy or self-absorbed that Christmas just kind of loses its meaning to us. We're not really getting what's going on. And most of all, it comes when we're living our lives based on something that isn't based in the Word. And those times are particularly painful at Christmas, aren't they? Because you see all around you what your spirit could be, and yet right now it's not. So the thing is that we're all motivated by butter and honey in our lives. We're all trading for silver, always. The Lord was able to save us because He had one single focus. I'm here for the salvation of humanity. I don't think that any of us are going to have that kind of singular attention. We don't have that kind of spiritual awareness. But what we can do is lift ourselves up above the fray of everyday life take the time to reflect and really choose some values that we want to embody. And for the time being, make that our singular focus. Right now, I want to focus on going through this Christmas season being more humble than I usually am. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut a little bit more. And that's that singular focus that lifts us up. And that's going to take focus. It's going to take daily prayer. It's going to take reading the Word. It's going to take reflective time so that we can say, how am I doing on that one? And of course, that leads us to refuse the evil and choose the good, doesn't it? It course corrects us back onto that path that the Lord has already cleared for us to eternal happiness. So Christmas has so many external delights. That's part of the reason it's fun, is it's just everybody's in a good mood. You go outside and people are smiling more. That's wonderful, isn't it? And the Lord wants us to be carried along by that external ebullience. But in 3 weeks, it's gone. And we're just going to be back into January with a long time till the daffodils come out. Let's take this time between now and Christmas to use that external environment that's saying, be a nicer person, and lift our minds up to find that deeper butter and honey. Choose a specific way that we want to become a better person, to set a standard, to set a goal for ourselves that can change not just how we show up right now, but can maybe have some lasting power in our character. So the Lord wants to fill us with delight. And He'll take jingle bells and giving gifts if that's all we've got in us. But He would love to fill us with a delight that lasts and lasts and lasts. And that happens when we step back and say, I choose what is deeper. This is what I stand for. This is what I'm going to work on. And then we can receive the joy that He's waiting to give us. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy may be full.